Good morning, everyone. If you are a listener and it's not morning right now, go ahead and listen to something else. Come back. Once it's morning time.
No, because they may not come
kind
back.
of in the same mindset as the rest of us. But go ahead and get yourself a nice black cup of coffee, maybe a breakfast burrito, and join us for some table talk. I don't know if I told you guys this, but I have recently been hit with some kind of divine retribution.
It's about time.
So I think I don't know if I talked about this on Table Talk. I may have, but my Monday night DCC game has grown very large, and I started to I think we got to the point where we had 7 or 8 players, and so for several weeks I had been encouraging them to come up with ways to downsize the game, either split it into 2 games or I don't know. I kept trying to get them to work with me to come up with some acceptable solution because it's just too many players to be workable. A couple of players, one of them's moving. Another one said basically, there was this class I wanted to take that conflicts, so I'll leave. And then what happened? Another player said he had some family thing going on, so he was going to leave. So I went from 7 players to 4 very quickly and thought, okay, perfect. And then had a 2-week-long drought where people weren't... when I would put up my scheduling prompt, which I post 3 to 4 days in advance of a session just to see who's going to make it.
Sure.
We've had a pretty uninterrupted run. I think over the past year plus that we've been playing, we've only skipped a handful of weeks. We've now missed 2 weeks in a row because not enough people signed up to come.
That's a bad sign. Not that it's necessarily permanent, but it could, to your divine retribution point, spell doom. If
I may have pruned the trunk.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. If people don't get out of that unscheduled funk, it can become permanent if you're not careful.
Well, it's only bad news if you choose to feel badly about it.
Is that right?
I would feel badly.
I'm a little sad that you didn't get to split your game into 2, because I think that would be a really, really interesting idea of one of your players starts DMing from the same point, and then the story branches for some reason. The party splits story-wise, and one half goes one way and one half goes another.
Well, something that's odd about this group is it's entirely composed of people who don't want to DM, except me.
I think that's pretty typical. I don't think that's anomalous.
I have not experienced it before. So, and there's a caveat here. One of them I think is interested in DMing, but I think is very self-conscious about doing it for this group. And no, most of the groups I played in before, you've got a few people who have DM'd before, and maybe some up-and-coming type people who are interested in learning how to do it. But I've never interacted with such a large group of players that were so averse to changing roles up at some point, or in order to split the game, someone else was going to have to take on some kind of leadership role. But anyway, it looks like maybe that glitch has fixed itself, and we just won't have a game anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's another way to resolve that issue.
It's kind of an elegant solution to the whole thing that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I would be absolutely fascinated too. What I would want to do in such a case is, let's say it was you, me, and then 6 jacks in the party. And then you took 3 and I took 3.
Which is not a group I would consent to DM for, by the way.
But
I'm surprised you put up with one of me.
But what I would love to do in such a case is, after we split up, we both have a recording or whatever, or someone is keeping a log, and then we just compare stories afterwards of, hey, after we split up, what did your party do? What did my party do? And what would be really funny if you did something like that is very deliberately make sure that the parties go in different directions and then have them meet up again at some point and do some adventure again together as rare events. That would actually be kind of neat.
So there are a few concepts like this that Caboose and I have kicked around, but not on the level of a campaign. More of a, we run a lot of bigger one-shot type games, and I mean big both in terms of they're longer sessions, usually maybe like 6, 7, 8 hours, but also big in terms of like physical scale and just general extravagance. So the table that we've been playing on recently, I think, is maybe 5 feet by 9 feet or something, and he's working on one that's a little longer, and it's got integrated lighting over the top of it with like black lights and LEDs. We 3D print our miniatures. We'll come up with these big elaborate maps, and we even had a fog machine at the last one. But we have been kicking around the idea of running a game where 2 people DM in separate rooms. And it's 2 smaller parties that ultimately come together at the end and maybe like have to work together to get through some dungeon or have to fight each other. So they have like a workup phase, and then they enter this sort of like they get put together on the same map. We thought that would be neat. We are planning on doing something like that in the not too distant future, but we haven't worked the details out yet. But I think that's definitely different from what you described, because the 2 DMs, well, it's backwards. It's instead of having a common starting point and diverging, we're talking about having like a planning on a common convergence.
Right.
Or I guess not a common convergence, of course that's common. Planning on a convergence point.
Yeah, but starting as completely separate entities. I think that's still interesting. I'd love to see how something like that turns out.
And since right now I'm like experimenting with different ways to like sabotage personal relationships and just lose friends generally. I think the idea of having players, form teams and then fight each other with me judging who wins is like really intriguing.
I mean, it's intriguing, no doubt. I like that kind of stuff. I like the idea of... I talked about it before for, like, the Demons of Downtime series, of having another player play the antagonist at the end. Not in the sense of developing them, but just acting in that part, and then as the DM just moderating as that fight goes down. And so I like the idea of players being able to do that, because one of the things that happens, I think, when you are DMing or GMing or handling or whatever the case may be, when you're doing something like combat, there's sort of this expectation sometimes that it needs to be like this certain level of difficulty, and you should hold back or push harder or whatever to make all these adjustments. And I think a lot of times that is appropriate when you're in that role. But I also like the idea of having it just be like, no, let's just pit these 2 things against each other and see what happens. Let's see who wins. And as long as you design it the right way, I think that can be a lot more interesting. So, for example, if I have Cassian, Ren, Blaze, and Maradius all fight against some horde of demons that Nerf is controlling, and I just moderate it, and he's legitimately trying to beat you, I think it adds a lot of extra flavor to it, because you really could just lose, and, assuming that Nerf plays along. So, now that's assuming that I could get all those people in one room and it wouldn't turn into a nightmare, but I think that's an interesting concept, and it's a little different than what we're used to.
It's a pretty big assumption.
Yeah. Well, and I've lost friends at the table before, but I've never destroyed a marriage, and so
right. New milestone. New
achievement.
Goal.
Yeah, it's the next peak I'd like to climb.
New Year's resolution.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it may be that just in a few short years, I'll have a story to tell about how that went.
Right. If we could ever get a session going again, then I'll tell you how it goes.
We play. It's one of those funny things about being a very old man. That I like when I think about how frequently I do things, like in the case of playing in person at Cabooses Place, I'm like, oh yeah, we do that pretty often. And then I think back and I go, I probably did that like 6 or 7 times this past year.
Yeah.
That's not that often.
Sorry, and you're referring to what in terms of frequency, or just as a general statement?
I'm referring to, I don't like. Something can feel a certain way with respect to frequency. Like if you ask me, how often do you think you do something? You know, like daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. Something like that. I would say like, I think I probably do that like once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month. It's like, no, it's like once every 2 months probably.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
You know, it feels more frequent than it is, and I'm sure that's true for many other things that I do.
Right. Yeah, because
I'm sure a lot of it's because the event itself is, one aspect of it, but a lot more time is spent planning it and thinking about it, so you're engaged with it more often than just the once every 2 months.
That's definitely true. But I don't know. I got to thinking about the differences between friends when you're a kid and friends when you're an adult, where, when you're a kid, you might hang out with your friend. Like if you have a best friend, you might hang out with them, the majority of your waking time. Like, you might be in school together at their house, or they're at your house when you're not. You're together on the weekends, stuff like that. And then when you're an adult, if you regularly get together with a friend, maybe like one weekend day a month for a solid day, that's pretty good.
Well, that's, I think, one of the jokes about Jesus was the real miracle was a grown man who had 12 friends in his 30s.
Friends in his 30s. Yeah.
I agree with that, I think, at least to some degree. If you happen to work with somebody who's your friend, then maybe not so much. Then it's sort of similar in that when you're a kid, you're hanging out with them in school. As an adult, you're hanging out with them at work. But yeah, apart from that, I think that having responsibilities as an adult, or especially if you've got a family or other commitments, other things come up that prevent you from just having that unmoderated free time that you can devote to just hanging out with one person in particular or one group.
Well, I think a lot of it also has to do with when you're a kid, you largely have the same schedule as the other kids. Everyone's going to school at the same time. A lot of after-school activities are going to take place immediately after school and will last for a couple hours. Weekends are off, unless you have a sport that conflicts with that. But like, you will have very similar schedules. Once you're an adult, all bets are off, really. Some people have 9 to 5s. Some people have a similar 5-day schedule, but it's not 9 to 5. Some people are on shift work. Some people have weird offset schedules. And so there's a lot less time where both of you are going to be free.
That's an excellent
that assumes
point.
That you're in the same area. Like, most of the friends that I regularly interact with aren't even anywhere close to me, and so that makes it even harder to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go drive hours to go and see this person with some frequency.
Yeah, and I do wonder if the things that we're saying maybe are a little less true now, in the sense that given that we use Discord while we make this podcast, given that we have these abilities to hang out virtually, it enables me to maintain friendships with people that are not in my vicinity. And so it's possible that maybe some of these things were more common. So for example, let's say this was 30 years ago and we could still call each other, but there are less means for me to hang out with people virtually or over long distance. If I'm going to hang out with people, it's going to be with people who are in my vicinity, who are in some ways more likely to share some commonalities in schedule with me. So it could be that as technology advances, our ability to do physical hangouts, or our inclination to do them, decreases a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all true. And there's another aspect of this that I've been thinking about recently, which is, when you're a kid, you have ready-made friends because you're put into a group of other kids your own age, and you do a bunch of activities together, and you will naturally make friends with people. And even with very good friends, you will fight. You will have disagreements, or even, pretty normal for kids to have physical fights with each other. And given that you have a pretty limited capacity to just leave, you usually move past that stuff. So, you have like an argument or a scrap or something like that with your best friend or whatever, and then you you get over it and you're hanging out at their house the next day. And I similarly, one of my first jobs after I got out of college was somewhat isolated, and so it was a group of people that I don't want to give too many details, but you're just around the same people a lot, and so similarly, you befriend them, you fight with them and stuff like that, but you're stuck together, and so you have to move past that and get over it. And that's the older I get, and now that I'm in a more conventional, office type job, the less true that is. So if anything makes me, if I see anything I don't like, if someone says something that I don't care for, whatever, I can just avoid that person. And I think that's more and more true. Maybe less so for kids, but as an adult, it's way more true than it was as a kid. That the inclination that you had before to separate yourself from someone who did one little thing that you don't like, you can now act on. You can given that you don't live right next door to these people, and it takes more deliberate effort to get together with someone. Means it's the easiest thing in the world to just stop seeing them at all. And I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with how atomized people tend to become as they age.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I've thought similar things in terms of dating versus marriage, where when you're dating, the barrier to exit is pretty low. You can just break up. And I'm simplifying it, but you don't have to fill out any paperwork. You can just decide, and then it's over. And so, which is a good thing. One of the things about marriage is that there is some work involved with dissolving that bond. So there might be some element there that encourages people to figure out how to work through issues, as opposed to just breaking up in the event that something happens that some party is unsatisfied with. That comes with some downsides too, but it's just a difference in the way that those two relationships work that can encourage some different reactions to those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting that I guess the complete absence of pressure to stick it out in your friendship or a work relationship or a romantic relationship like you're describing can, at least in the short term, incentivize you to just be avoidant if something doesn't go your way. But in the long term, looking back, there are good friendships that I have now that formed when I was younger, that formed in under circumstances where, I'm sure we must have, we probably had arguments or, met under circumstances that if it happened now, I wouldn't be friends with them.
Right.
But it was a different time and a different place, and we were kind of stuck together, and we got to know each other better out of necessity or circumstance, and grew to be very, very good friends. And now we're much older, and these things are solid. But I don't know. It's interesting to think that. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but I think you see what I mean.
No, I do.
The inverse of that
Go on.
is I had a bunch of friends growing up those were the friends because that was my choice. Those were my options. And they weren't very good friends. They weren't very good people. And so when I became an adult and I could go and be like, all right, no, I don't need that shit in my life anymore. I was able to kind of call out a lot of like bad juju, negativity, and like bad people, and actually go and cultivate friendships that, were going to be good friendships. And so, yeah, I still have friends that, I grew up with and, could have learned and did all the other stuff with. But for me, it was kind of the opposite of as soon as I got old enough that I could actually like call out the things that I just was like handed and weren't actually good for me. It was a much better like friendship group that I was able to build because I know what kinds of things that generally I need as a foundation, and then we can work through the rest of it as we become closer friends.
And you ended up here. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, how did I end up here?
Rock bottom.
Yeah. I mean, there are absolutely two sides to this coin. But looking at my own good friendships, and I'm happy to say that I have more than my fair share of solid friends. But most of them, not all, are people I've known for a long time. Are people who I've made, who I became friends with under more of those like early life circumstances, and along the way have hard or soft loss. Some had fallings out, like just clear, discrete fallings out, or just grown apart kind of stuff. And then I have some friends, relatively few, that are also good inner circle types that I have made in the past, say, 5 years as an adult. I don't know. I mean, it's a different strategy. There are different rules. But I can't help but think that, I suspect but don't know that the advice to just avoid or walk away is much more prevalent now than when I was younger. When, anytime people would talk about relationships, they'd say, the key is communication, you gotta put in work, you gotta work it out, talk to each other, that kind of, and now, I hear a lot more of, you're not compatible, just leave it, cut it off, and I don't know. I think that is often just very short-sighted.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why that is perhaps a more tenable option now is the greater ability to communicate that I alluded to earlier, and then also I think it's easier to find opportunities of any kind, whether it's relationship opportunities or job opportunities or something like that, in either your same current location or your ability to move to somewhere else and assess the viability of that beforehand is also greater. And so, if you don't like your job now, it is easier to find other opportunities or assess whether there are opportunities available elsewhere than in the past, based mostly on the existence of the internet. And so I think the idea is it is easier to pick something else now. And so it is not as obvious that it is beneficial to stick something out, but sort of to the point that I think you were getting at. I think we do lose something in that exchange. There is something good about the instinct to try to work through things as opposed to abandoning them. And that, I don't know, it could potentially lead to some negative consequences. And I do find that discussion interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a case of people don't think of friendships as something they need to build or work on. Ideally, you meet someone and just hit it off, and you arrive at the finish line. You have a ready-made friend, and you just understand each other. But I think if you spend time with someone only in good circumstances and everything's totally frictionless, then there's a much better chance that, well, I mean, you don't know them very well. Like if you only see someone when they're up, or when you're agreeing on everything, then you don't really know them that well. Like there are other sides to that.
They're an automatic fair weather friend.
Sure. Well, or until proven otherwise. Like you need to, what are they like when they're tired? What are they like when, when they're losing, or scared, or people are multifaceted and they behave differently under different circumstances, and it's not a secret that one of the best and quickest ways to make friends is to go through some shit with someone. Now, ideally, that shit is imposed by some external force on the two of you,
right?
And not, by the two of you. But that happens too.
Right.
Like conflict or at least adversity is a well-known, I would argue, necessary ingredient for good relationships.
You could say conflict cleaves, which is true in the sense that it can split apart and bring together.
I might say that. I wouldn't.
Cleave is one of the interesting words in the English language that is its own antonym, for those who didn't know.
No, come back.
I'd
Come
never
back,
heard
listeners.
it used that way.
Yeah. Don't turn the podcast off.
Well, but coming back, it's like Jack always says, if you can't handle him at his worst, you don't deserve him at his best.
Yeah. I have heard him say that, and I didn't know what he was talking about.
He
'Cause
puts
it
it on
seems
his
like Jack
Tinder
is
profile.
always at his worst.
I know. I've
I was
yet
gonna
to
say,
see him
I am
anywhere else.
very, very rarely in a state that isn't despicable and just hard to be around. But
I feel like I've been handling it at his worst for years, waiting for this payoff.
It's coming.
I
Well,
just
you
have
just
a very
need
slow Marilyn Monroe cycle.
to
But
say
I guess
you gotta be part of the pen pals. They're the ones who get to see him at his best.
Oh, I see. We're just in the wrong medium.
Yeah, I'm only tolerable when I have a really long time to think about what I'm gonna say.
Right. Only through a rigorous editing do you become tolerable.
I have started creating the adversity that I think other people need to form better friendships.
Ah.
So I'm working on imposing as many hardships as I can on those around me, out of love.
Right. Yeah. It's for the greater good.
They don't know why, but I'm hooking them up.
I like to imagine that this takes the form of people who are friends with you are basically experiencing like a reality TV show all the time. There's all these bonding challenges. They have to do 3-legged foot races and trust falls and
I'm
all
like-
these weird exercises.
I'm kind of Dennising them.
Perfect.
Where, like, their car breaks down. I'm like, it's no problem. I can give you a ride.
Right. Little did they know that you're the one who sabotaged
Yeah.
it. Yeah. You've talked about using the Dennis method a lot, so.
The Dennis system.
Sorry, the Dennis system.
Is that show still going?
I
believe
sure
Because
so.
I know
is.
they brought it back at one point.
I don't think they
I don't know
ever
if it-
stopped.
I want to say that. I never watched it, so I don't know. I thought it stopped at one point and then came back, but
It's funny because I think you would like it, actually, Jack.
I
It's
don't even,
a
so
very
by the
funny
way,
show.
audience, for anybody who hasn't heard of the Dennis system or whatever, we're talking about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Which is a rare show that I think has, they found a formula that worked, and they didn't fuck with it too much, and it stayed very good over time. I haven't seen the most recent couple of seasons, but I don't know, maybe like through season 9 or something like that. I've watched a lot of the episodes, and they're very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen almost every episode, I think, up through about season 12. And because I think they're on season 14 or 15 now, something like that.
Okay.
And I might be off by a little bit, but yes, very, very funny. It's really interesting to hear or read about their process. They started a podcast within the last 2 years or so where they were Charlie Day,
Typical.
Rob McElhaney, and the guy who plays Dennis. I can't remember his name. Glenn Reynolds? Is that right? Glenn Howerton. They started doing a podcast where they started going through every episode in sequence that they had made and just talking about their process, or having people on who were, who they came in to guest star or whatever. And it's really interesting to hear them talk about their own process for how they develop an episode, how they write one, where they get their inspiration from, and especially some of the hardships of them filming the early seasons before they had really gotten into their groove. Really, really interesting.
Well, and I've gotten the impression that they haven't allowed making like a lot of money to significantly change the way they do things. It hasn't appeared to corrupt them anyway. Like, and I know I don't know his name, the dude who plays Mac.
Rob McElhaney.
Famously went the other way with respect to looks. Maybe this is why he did it. I think he was saying something along the lines of, typically a show like this gets successful and the main characters really get a lot better looking. Now that actor has like a personal trainer and, personal chef and stuff like that, and they become beautiful. And he got really fat and disgusting, deliberately.
For like one season, yeah.
But he put on a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And then he got shredded. But I don't know. It was weird because I think he shows up like first episode of the next season, and you're like, holy shit, he put on, 50 pounds or something.
Yeah, it's like it's real weight, and it's really funny. And then he shows up looking really, really good. And one of the things that was interesting was hearing him talk about his process for that, because there's been a lot of conversation, I guess, in some spaces when it comes to actors who do that, who become ripped, and how it can be sort of bad for them in the sense that if they get jacked for some role, and that's something that they don't do normally, if they're out of their normal kind of fitness routine and they have to put in a lot of work, well, now that's sort of an expectation that they maintain that, and that can be really difficult for some people. Not in the sense that, it's difficult for them to stay in shape at all, but for them to maintain that very, very high level of fitness when their actual profession does not really call for that. They could be much less fit and still act, but now they've become someone who can be cast as the ripped dude or whatever. He talked about that at one point, where getting super ripped like that was really hard, and maintaining that level of fitness is very difficult and unrealistic for a lot of people to do outside of people who naturally attain that through their profession. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah. That's why I just use steroids.
You just sit on the couch, though. you inject steroids and do nothing.
I mean, if you do that, you'll be more jacked than someone who lifts well or lifts frequently naturally. There's more. I mean, that's been demonstrated through research, that you will put on more lean muscle mass just doing the steroids than you could hope to accomplish by lifting.
You're gonna need to add that to the link down.
I will. And I don't mean you can't gain muscle, lifting without using steroids. Just that it's the steroids alone do a tremendous amount of work. I say this as someone who doesn't use steroids, but I look kind of like Xerxes from
you
300.
Look like you do.
I'm a little taller, and I had similar jewelry taste as well.
I am a generous god.
I never understood why I understand why various sports leagues have made it so that you're not allowed to use steroids and then still participate in the league, but I don't understand why they're illegal. I'll
go further than that. I wish they were allowed in
They should have
most
steroid
sports.
leagues as well.
I've said this forever. I would be much more interested in, like, I don't watch a lot of sports. I mean, obviously, I pay a lot of attention to, like, the mini golf masters and other high-end, that marble racing stuff.
If there's one sport where more muscle mass, like, can you imagine a roided out guy playing mini golf?
Right.
Huge
Well,
benefit.
Come see me sometime. And I'll show you what it's like to be huge and play mini golf. But no, I would, like, wouldn't something like football, where, like, let's not pretend we don't give a shit about these guys' long-term health or safety. Like, wouldn't it be more interesting if they were roided out monsters? Like, all the TBI stuff that we're hearing with them, like, let's not pretend we care. Like, we don't give a shit about these guys. Let's let them develop in the monsters they were meant to be, and just, like, make it, like, and just have them go at it. That would be way more interesting.
We've talked about this before, and I mean, I do care about their health, and I don't support or watch football because of that. It's been demonstrated now that NFL knew a lot about some of this stuff and was trying to kind of keep it out of common conversation. And now that it is popular and well known, this kind of TBI issue, they are starting to take some steps to try to reduce that. But I wish that we did not have professional football. I wish that we didn't, as a culture, make that aspirational for people to participate in something like that. That is, you could play some other sport that's much less destructive to your body. And so, like, I wish we did turn that off. I do think that the minimum that we can do, given that we're not going to delete football, like, it's just not going to happen, the least we can do is not make it worse. So,
And I think we have fundamentally different ideas about kind of how we'd like society to work. Like,
right, you want to destroy it, whereas I want to preserve it.
No. I would like a rich spectrum of choices. I don't want to decide that one thing is good or bad, and then if it's bad, see it eliminated. I don't want smoking to just entirely go away. Like, you don't have to smoke if you don't want to. We know it's bad for you. Don't smoke if you don't want to smoke. I don't want smoking to go away. I don't want it to be taxed into oblivion. We all know football is, like, not healthy. But football is also, I think, really broken in terms of how long you have to sit and wait for anything to happen. It's like how long is a football game? Like 3 hours?
Talking
4 hours? They're long. Like, except the amount of playtime is a small fraction of that. If we're going to have it, like, if we refuse to amend the rules to fix that problem, let's roid these guys out. So it's like, what is the other Hulk called? The first Hulk movie that came out, the one that had Edward Norton and Tim Roth. Where,
Was there another Hulk in that movie?
Yeah, there's like because Tim Roth becomes like a second Hulk, and they fight each other.
I don't remember this.
I'm not a comic
I've seen
book
that
nerd.
movie, and I don't remember this.
Shepard, weigh in.
I don't know what that character's name is.
All right. Well, at the end of the movie, there are like two Hulk things just going at it. That's what I want.
Yeah, I think that, again, it creates this race to the bottom. I think if you are too libertarian with what we allow in that kind of thing, because, again, what I think that creates is, if you create the Roid League and then the regular league, then you're going to incentivize people to join the Roid League or something like that, which is because it's probably going to be more entertaining for people who like that kind of, more destructive environment. And I think that it's going to, again, make things worse in the sense that people are getting more injured and hurt, but not actually change anything, because that'll just become the new normal. And we've just traded off like a set of principles and ethics in order to achieve nothing in the long run.
I don't know. I think Adam Smith agrees with me here. I think
The character's name, by the way, is the Abomination.
The Abomination. Which is what they call me when I play miniature golf. Throwing my water jug down. slamming those balls through the windmill, like punching a hole in, what are they called? Blades? Veins of the windmill?
Veins. I haven't played mini golf in too long. I need to go play mini golf sometime.
Yeah, it sounds like we already know what's going to happen here. The marketplace has decided roid football superior.
Right.
You know,
I think
the regular football is going to go the way of like the WNBA, where there are going to be a bunch of principled people saying, you know, like, oh, well, this like should be interesting, and it's like, yeah, but nobody watches it.
Right, but then at the end of the day, that just becomes the new normal, and all we've done is increase injury rates.
I don't know that that's true. I mean, I think you're kind of making an argument that no change is ever positive, like because everything just becomes a rebaseline, and so there's no point in ever altering anything.
I don't think that's the point I'm making. I think
developing medicine, like, you know, rebaselining like how healthy people are over the course of their lives, like, is that a wash as well?
No, I think that there are instances where when you get rid of policies, in some sense, that they do encourage behavior that tends to end up being, again, a race to the bottom, ethically speaking. That is not true for all things. I think this is such a case where that is true.
I don't see where ethics comes into it. I'm not advocating that we like kidnap people, inject them with some serum, and then, you know, throw them into a pit to play football with each other.
I think ethics does come into play if we have a policy in place right now that prevents people from doing something that will injure them more for the sake of other people's entertainment
and their own enrichment.
Well, I don't know that it is enriching. What's enriching about that?
The riches,
make a lot of money.
Yeah.
No. But so, are we increasing their pay? Are we giving them a stipend now for doing steroids?
I would imagine demand would go up if people were more interested in watching. To Duncan's point, I think you would probably make more money if there were more viewers.
Up until now, I have not gotten the impression that most professional athletes are like out there performing these sports like out of charity for the rest of us. I think
I'm not saying they're not getting paid.
They like playing the sport. They want to make a lot of money. They want to be famous.
Sure, and at no point did I imply that that's not the case.
But that's the enrichment. Like,
right,
they've
already
doing
got
it for themselves.
We already have them making money playing this sport without incentivizing them to also take steroids, and especially when you've got a contact sport like football, but it's heavy with contact. The stronger and beefier they are, the more likely they are to injure themselves.
But my system, like if I'm the one designing these systems, I'm not trying to optimize it for their enrichment. I'm trying to optimize it for the enjoyment of the average person, e.g. me.
Right, and my point is, I think long term, if you introduce the ability to take performance-enhancing drugs into that equation, at the end of the day, in 10 years, once this has fully taken effect and the marketplace has decided that if you want to be competitive, you have to take these things, everyone is now on a level playing field again. And from the sidelines, it's going to be difficult to tell, that anything has really changed. It's like I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
I think it is. I mean, I think some things will change a little. People will be able to throw farther and kick farther. But it's like if two people who are pretty good at running run next to each other, and then two people who are really good at running run next to each other. You can see that their times are different, but from the stands, it looks pretty much the same unless you have some way to compare those two different events. And I think that would end up being mostly the case for football as well when you give everyone steroids.
I don't think that's true. I mean, what I'll use here is like men's sports and women's sports in general. Like what gets more viewership, even though I think by your argument, they should both be, roughly equally popular because, in terms of viewership, because, women are competing against women and men are competing against men. And so, if you're watching women race each other or play basketball against each other or something like that, then, they should get about the same draw. And they don't. Like, it's not close. So I think we could expect to see a similarly large gulf between, regular men playing something and like roided out supermen playing something.
I don't think the gap between professional male athletes and then professional male athletes on steroids is as big as the gap between professional male athletes and professional female athletes in a similar sport.
I think it could easily be not only equal to that gap, but
bigger.
greater.
Yeah.
It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
What steroids can do
especially
to
when you
someone.
consider how steroids could allow people to play these games for much, much longer and not just be really big, but have like a tremendous amount of experience relative to current players. Their ability to recover from injuries and stuff like that is much greater. So I think I disagree with some of your core positions here, which are that like the rebaselining thing, I've made a couple of statements against, and the ethics of the thing. I mean, I know it's a little more complicated than this, but as far as I'm concerned, if it's voluntary, I ain't got no problem with it.
I've made my points.
So, changing the subject completely, we were talking about It's Always Sunny earlier, and it got me thinking about TV.
No, hold on. Jesse wants to weigh in.
I hate football. I want nothing to do with any of this.
I'm also not interested in football.
I hate football too, but what you're missing is I just fixed it for all of us.
No, I don't want to see that even if they do that. Hard pass.
Okay, what about roided out ping pong though? Or
no.
foosball, a game. Foosball with dudes that had enormous lobster claw forearms.
No.
What about roided out CSGO?
Oh, there we go. Just guys that get like really inordinately mad.
No, that would be terrifying.
Because as things stand, gamers are a very calm and collected bunch.
Maybe badminton.
What about Delta Green?
How that wouldn't help us. That would just
don't
be a
know
bunch
if
of
you try.
bad decisions and getting shot. I don't know.
But
With
it
us
would
not
move the
taking
game
steroids
along.
Now we don't make those.
It would
If-
certainly
if-
be a shorter campaign. Yeah.
If everybody at the table was way more aggressive, then
Well,
we wouldn't be having these dinner at the in-laws house episodes.
And
well,
what
maybe
do
right.
if
think
you
that would be?
maybe if Jack
You guys would be on
used
like
his
your
firearm
fourth
skills
characters by now.
No, I would prefer that sports. I understand the whole concept of why sports are good, blah blah blah. But I would just prefer that they didn't exist because I find them boring and
No, that's a position I can get behind. I was really optimistic in the early days of COVID that COVID would kill sports. And part of it is because I think we have the wrong sports. Like the best games from our childhood, for some reason, don't make
Mat
it. We
ball.
have these like shitty, boring sports. Yeah, like where's scooter ball? Where are the professional scooter ball leagues? Where's mat ball? Where's capture the flag? Or ultimate frisbee? I guess
Frisbee's a thing, at least.
kind of. But like, if you actually want to watch adults play any of this stuff, you gotta get on the Ocho. Although I guess there was that, I don't know if any of you watched this during deep COVID, the like professional tag.
Oh yeah, no, I'm familiar with this.
You know what I'm talking about, where there's this, it's small. It looks like it's like not much bigger than a boxing ring. Maybe it
It's
is
a
a
very
boxing
small,
ring.
very dense arena where it's
Yeah, and
basically just two people parkouring, and one person's trying to get away and one person's trying to not get away.
And it's like a buzzer beater thing. It's like, there are 10 seconds on the clock or something like that. And you got to get them before it times out. Or is it a time thing?
I think it's a time thing.
You're trying to avoid them for as long as possible and just see how long you can go. I think it's that one.
Yeah,
But-
we've talked about this before. I compared it to an episode of The Next Generation that has an arena that looks pretty much exactly the same.
I would watch that. I'll
What
get
about
behind that.
professional laser
You can.
tag?
God, I played laser tag one time, and 10-year-olds just kept shooting, like standing next to me and shooting me, and I wanted it so badly to just bop them
To
on the
just
nose.
hit them.
Well, but it was like
teach those kids a lesson.
it was a stranger. If it was my own family,
then you would beat the shit out of them.
that's right. But I couldn't. So instead, I yelled at him and tried to make him cry.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
I mean, not super successful because it was like a 10-year-old boy and they're immune to shit like that, but I won in the end, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm. No, you sound like you won. You sound like you haven't been carrying this around with you for a while.
Like 10 years? Yeah.
But
Anyway, the thing that I wanted to talk about. So, we were talking about Always Sunny, and it got me thinking about just TV. I recently picked up the Netflix Castlevania series on Blu-ray. I've been watching through it. I didn't realize there were 4 seasons of it. I knew there was a season 2. I had never seen it. I had only ever seen season 1. Have you guys watched this?
I watched
No.
the first 2 and change seasons. I thought the first 2 were pretty good, and then I got about halfway through this 3rd season and stopped being interested.
But I'm not really into
am-
whips as much as you are.
I'm 1 episode into season 3 right now, and I've got some thoughts, which I guess will be less interesting if most people at the table haven't.
I think the
seen
kids call them
the show.
hot takes.
I wouldn't say they're hot takes, but they are thoughts.
Are they takes?
Listen, if they're not hot
don't know,
takes,
maybe.
I'm not interested. Hot takes
That's
only.
fair. Now I'll put them out there, and if anybody watches the series later, you can tell me if you agree. But
Email us.
season 1, which first of all I don't remember only being 4 episodes. It's
Yeah,
pretty quick.
it's really
I
short.
I think Netflix was not super confident that this was going to have an audience, so season 1 is very much a let's see what people think, and we'll make a longer one if people like it. It's pretty good, but there's one character, the Bishop, where I don't know what happened. If they just went into every episode and said, "All right, he's talking. Make sure no one can hear him." Where we're like, someone will say something to him, and it'll be very clear, it'll be very audible, and then he'll say, "You're like, what?"
I absolutely did not have that experience. I have no idea what you're talking about.
He just has this very like subdued voice, and I don't know, maybe it's the acoustics of my apartment, but every other character I could hear loud and clear. Him, if I didn't have subtitles on, I wouldn't have any idea what he was saying.
It's the
most of the time.
motorcycles that I was
It's the
planned.
motorcycles, yeah.
Yeah, to drive by your house right as he was talking.
My
But-
suspicion is that, are you listening to it on speakers in your place?
Sure am.
Yeah,
And
so,
Netflix may have mixed it for headphones.
right. Well, or it could be that the Blu-ray release specifically is also mixed different with audio. They
Okay, well,
they can
it's
have higher
mixed
fidelity
poorly.
audio on Blu-ray than on streaming typically.
Yeah, they do.
So, but what that means is they probably mix things differently, and it could just be a consequence of that. If you really want to experiment with it, I would try watching it on Netflix on headphones and speakers,
I don't have Netflix.
and then watching it on Blu-ray on speakers and headphones, and then seeing if it's the case for all of them. I don't remember that being the case at all. Watching it on headphones on Netflix.
This is a commitment.
That would be an interesting test. I'm not interested in doing it. My watching method is sitting on my couch, on my TV, watching on my Blu-ray player through speakers. So it doesn't really matter to me if it sounds better when I'm watching it a way that isn't that.
Sure. No, I
found it
the
very
point.
frustrating.
Yeah.
I am a subtitles guy. I would have subtitles on anyway, but it's annoying to me when they become mandatory. But I liked the first season. It was pretty good. And then the second season, which was double the length and half the content, felt like the main characters pretty early on in the season head to a library to get some information, and then they're just hanging out in the library for the next 6 episodes. And then you get to the last 2 episodes when everything starts happening very quickly. There's a lot of waiting in the second season.
Well, maybe that's like somebody's D&D campaign.
Yeah,
Where
maybe.
It's like they weren't there for those sessions. So you're like, oh yeah, they went to the library.
It's the pacing seemed a bit off. I am very much enjoying the show, but it's got some problems.
Yeah, I liked season 2 generally. I think that the reason why it takes those characters so long is because they end up focusing more on the other set of characters that they end up diving more into, which is everyone at Dracula's place.
Yeah, I had some issues with that as well, though. I guess just to give a general flavor for the people in the conversation who haven't seen the show, the first season is basically just introducing the protagonists and setting up that Dracula wants to kill everybody. Because again, pretty short, just gauging interest. And then season 2 is the protagonists going about the business of figuring out how to do this. That's why they're in the library, is to do some research on it. And in the meantime, you're watching Dracula and his war council conducting this war against humanity, except not really. It's odd. It seems like the show writers want this to feel like a really big conflict, like it's a war, and the vampires are going to kill everybody, and in theory are actually doing that somewhere off screen. You never really see it, but it doesn't, like, that's the way that people talk. It's like, yes, this is an extermination, this is a culling, they're all gonna die. But it feels like just a lot of standing around. And they kind of nod to that in, like, Dracula's being indecisive, and the war is not progressing as quickly as people would like, but it feels like it's not progressing at all. The actual what you see on the screen versus what's discussed is wildly different in terms of scale. The conflict doesn't feel nearly as big as I think the showrunners were going for. And as a result, the stakes just don't feel very high, because it's this imminent threat that doesn't really seem to be moving at all.
Yeah, I can see that. It's been a while, so I don't really remember. And I do think that the Dracula character in that show is one of the best examples of the modern sympathetic villain, where I feel like there's been a tendency over the past couple years to make every villain sympathetic, and you can't just have a bad guy anymore. And it makes me pine for the days when there's just a bad guy, and he's
my
bad.
understanding is that in the later seasons there is a more villainous villain.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if that's actually true, but yeah, I definitely agree. He's a good character. I like Dracula. I like whoever the voice actor is. I'm actually not sure I recognize the voice, but he did a great job. But it is sort of a, like, you take a step back, all he's missing is a little pain tattoo on his cheek,
Yeah. I mean, I think the story of him is well executed. It's a symptom of a greater thing that I'm not as fond of, which is can he just be evil? Is that okay? Can we just make him a bad guy?
That was actually another thing. Episode 1, when he's basically declaring himself to the world of, like, all right, I'm going to kill all of you. The amount of effects they applied to his voice during his speech, it wasn't nearly as bad as the bishop. But there were definitely some points during that speech where I also felt like I would have had a hard time without the subtitles, because, like, the amount of reverb that they were adding, and just, like, other effects layered on top, so it barely even sounded like a person anymore. Or I don't know, it was a choice. I don't think it was a very good choice.
Yeah. Or, I mean, there might just be straight up something wrong with your audio setup.
It sounds good for everything else. Every single other thing that I have watched on this setup sounds normal and natural. This is an issue that appears to be unique to certain characters in this one series. So I suspect it's an audio issue on their end, not mine.
Could be.
Really good show
It's definitely
so far,
a
though.
them problem, not a you problem.
Yeah, it's never a me problem. I am very much enjoying it so far. Minor complaints aside.
Well, I just watched Oppenheimer for the first time. My setup is I usually go to the grocery store, and then I kind of park my cart like sideways in the middle of an aisle, and then I take my phone out with no like AirPods, and then I watch movies like that. Did you guys know that we
is at least a very quick movie, so you wouldn't be in people's way for too long.
Yeah. Anyway, did not see the end coming in that one.
Yeah, it's a real twist.
I imagine you also found Titanic to be jarring at the end.
Yeah, well, obviously, too busy crying to really track what was going on at the end of Titanic, but I think it would have been better if they were all like roided out.